Good morning. This video is going to talk about something called baseline grid. Okay, this is something that I did not go into a lot of details in the video. And I just wanted to say thank you for sending me, any questions that you have, any issues that you have come across. You guys are really helping me kind of create a better template, so when I actually release this to the world, we'll have a really great template along with a different video series than I currently have. Just to let you know, I already have an outline of my new video series, and instead of doing just like this long, complex five episode video series, I'm actually going to do little mini series about different topics, which I think will help you in the long run, because when you have one particular issue, you don't have to search through those hours and hours of content for where I talked about that one particular issue. You'll be able to go to the video that talks about this, or you can ask me a question. Hey, Stephanie, I want to know more about this. Which video should I watch? Again, and then I'll say, go watch the video on baseline grids. Okay, so looking forward to that. It'll probably take me another month or two to get that going and out in the world, but all of your questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. You are not bothering me. You're actually helping me a great deal in producing the best product out there. All right, so we had a question come in about the baseline grid. And I bet you didn't realize it was the baseline grid. So the way this template is set up, if you notice, we have all these lines, okay? And if you do not see these lines in your, let me just do something to clear out these overrides. I'm just going to redefine the style, and so all of these will go away. So we... All right, so baseline grid. In book design, the way books are set up, and you can pull, if a book was designed properly, you can pull a book off your shelf and lay the book flat on a table, take a ruler and spread that ruler across 2 pages, and the line on the left-hand verso page will be on the same line on the right, the recto page, okay? So if we look at these baseline grids, let me pull a thing here. This line and this line are the same. So we can draw this straight line across, and we'll do it here, and they're going to fall on the same page. Whoops. This is called a baseline grid, okay? So all these lines right here are baseline grids. Now, the thing I didn't go into a lot of great detail is what are baseline grids and how can you change them? And the reason why I didn't is because it's a bit complicated. It's a series of math formulas, I guess you could say. And the easiest thing is not to have to tweak the baseline grid so much. Now, and what we're discovering is that it looks like down here we should have another line. Well, technically not, because this last line is outside of the baseline grid. The baseline grid for this document, if you're curious where the baseline grid is set up, you would think, well, my line spacing is 15 points. Shouldn't all of these be 15 points? Well, the baseline grid and your line spacing are similar, but they work a little differently. Even though this is 15 points, and I believe our baseline grid is set to 15 points, they're not exact. So the baseline grid, what we're going to do if you want to see what the baseline grid is, and you can adjust your baseline grid, and so you can make the line spacing tighter, or you can make it larger. So I'll go into how to change that in a minute, because if we make the line spacing 16, okay, you see, well, that's like double spaced. It's because what InDesign is doing, we tell InDesign to keep this chapter text on the baseline grid. And if you go to the paragraph symbol and you click over here, this right here, don't set the text to the baseline grid, and then this one here says align to the grid. Also in the style, if we go to the style, we'll have to remember where it's at, indents and spacing. On the indents and spacing tab for the paragraph style, it says align to grid, all lines. You can do none, first line only. Now, I recommend always using align to grid for all lines, because you always want your lines to be on the baseline grid, so you have where you can put that ruler across the page and everything is equal. Now you might say, well, that's always going to be the case, isn't it? Because you start at the top here and everything's going to be lined up. Well, that's not always the case, and I'm going to show you an example right quick. All right, so what I've done now is I have taken this text off the baseline grid. Okay, and now what you can see is that this line right here has actually come down to this space that was empty before. And if you notice, none of this text is falling exactly on the line as it was before. So we don't want this, and the reason being is, let's say I come right in here and I put in a scene break. And suddenly, you can't really tell, but we'll try to zoom in really close. Suddenly, because of this scene break, and we don't have anything set to the baseline grid, these lines are actually off now. If you notice, the bottom, I'm losing a lack of terms here, but we're going to draw out a line right here. See, all those letters hit that line right there. And if we go and do the same line on the other side, you'll see that it cuts in the middle. So these are no longer lined up. So this is why we always use the baseline grid, and this is why the template is set to use the baseline grid, because we want those to line up. So I'm going to undo all of that, and we're going to go back to our version of the baseline grid. So the question came is that, how do I get text to fill this bottom line? Well, this particular line will not be capable of being filled unless you break one of the rules. All right, so because this text right here is 3 lines, it's always going to stay together because of one thing, and it's our keep options in our chapter text. We have at the start and end of a paragraph, we start with 2 lines and we end with 2 lines. So what that means is any paragraph with 3 lines is going to stay together. It's not going to split. Now, if this was only 1 line, it probably still wouldn't fill up here, because I don't think this bottom baseline is 15 points, which I'll get to in a minute. So let's say, for purposes of balancing these pages, I decided to break that keep option rule. And I say that, well, we can start one sentence down here and have the other 2 finish up here. So what you would do, don't go into the style to correct this. Go into your little menu over here, this little 3-line menu, and go to the keep option. So what we're going to do is put an override in this one paragraph, and we're going to change it to start at 1. Okay, well, that did nothing. Why? Because this bottom space isn't 15 points. Okay, it's probably 14.75. So InDesign is thinking that there's not enough space to put here. Okay, now a few minutes ago I was going to show you where to change the baseline grid if you needed to. and I did not do that. So the baseline grid can be found in a weird spot. You go to Edit, Preferences, Grids. All right, so this is where we input our baseline grid. Okay, so this is 15. So if you have a book where you want to adjust the baseline grid to 16, so there's a larger line space, that's where you change it. Let's clear that override. Okay, so that's one thing you can do. And I'll get into an issue that arises from doing that, and I'll show you how to correct it in just a little bit. But let's go back to doing 15. Let's clear this override real quick. All right, so now you say, well, I want to get this line here. All right, the problem is this is not 15 points, okay? So if we put and draw a little box right here, this box is 0.2083 inches to points. And I'm using my other screen really quick, so I'm going to show you something. You can find a calculator that tells you what your inches are based on point sizes. So if you notice, our template is obviously off by, let's see, I'm horrible at math, so 15 minus 14.9976 by this much, okay? Oh, that's it, okay? That little space is what's causing, that small amount of space is what's causing that line not to be there. So you say, okay, Stephanie, I see the problem now. How can we correct it? Well, we need to adjust our bottom margin by that small increment. So now I know that my template is off by that much. I'm going to adjust it when I release it. So when you get the new template, you'll be able to see it. So what we need to do is we need to change the bottom margin on all the pages. So to do that, we're going to go to our Pages panel, and we are going to click on the A header, the first page, hold our Shift key down, and click on the last page of the last master page. So they're all blue. That means we have them all selected. So we're going to make a universal change. So we go to Layout, Margins and Columns, and you'll see that the top has nothing. And that's because the top margin is different on these pages. So if you do this and the bottom margin is whited out, you may have to do it on a page-by-page basis. So the bottom margin actually has a number here, so we can make this adjustment. So what we're going to do is we are going to minus, because we want the bottom margin to be lower, and we're going to do that 0.0024 and click on OK. All right, let's see. We might have to add IN. InDesign usually is good about doing math of these things, but for some reason it's not liking this. So let's pull out our calculator again. 0.8125 minus 0.0024 equals, all right, so this is what we want our new margin to be, 01. Click on OK. And what that does is it goes through and changes the bottom margin on these pages. And you're like, well, it still didn't happen. All right, so in this case, what we need to do is we need to go in and just drop that down a little bit more, because it was such a small amount that it may have not read it properly. All right, so there we go. So the thing is when you are adjusting margins, you still need to go to the individual pages and pull down that text frame. And if we zoom in long enough, we can see, making sure it hits. And you can actually pull it down even lower so it's beyond that line. Because remember, it doesn't matter. It's not going to put anything down below this because it's stopping at this baseline. All right. So now, if we look at the issue, that has been corrected. All because we actually have that override in there for it to break our paragraph. Now, this is called, when you have a single line down here, this is called a widow. And widows technically are not supposed to be done in book design, but if they are double page spreads like this, and you need to create a widow to balance your pages, I'm okay with this. I have no problem with this whatsoever. Okay. All right, so let's go on to look at a couple of other pages. All right, so these all fall at that bottom line. So we're all good now. Now here's another situation that if this line is not filled, so we would need to do the same thing where we create an override in this one paragraph, but that doesn't balance the pages. So I probably wouldn't do that. I'd probably find another area to correct this particular issue, to balance the pages. If you're really concerned about balancing pages, I know some people aren't. I'd probably just take this sentence right here and force it. And this one is very spaced out because it is trying to meet another rule that we have set up in the style. So to prevent this from being spaced out, I would manually adjust the grep style for this one paragraph. Instead of 10 spaces, I would tell it to do 7. Click on OK, and that corrects that style. And making that change throughout your document, if you want more than 10 spaces on the last line, 7 is okay. It really depends on your font. You can adjust in your character style, in your paragraph style for chapter text, you can always change that. If you're seeing a lot of spacing issues, you can always change the grep style where we have the number 10 to the number 7 here. But I wouldn't go any lower than 7. Because then we're going to create too many runts. And the whole purpose of this grep style right here is to prevent runts. And runts are where you have a very short line. I'm going to manually do a runt. This is a runt, okay? So it barely connects with the next sentence below. We would want at least this much, okay? This would be okay, but this would be about the minimum. And so that 7 is based on 7 characters. So the I, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So this line has 10, so this would be acceptable in our rules. And then I hope that makes sense. All right, so as always, I'm all over the place, but hopefully that helps you with your particular issue on why isn't that line is hitting all the way to the bottom. So to reiterate, just go in, select all your pages, adjust that bottom margin. You just need to add 0.0024, so change your bottom margin to 0.8101 inches, and then go into each master page and just bring that end of the text frame down just a hair so it actually registers that extra space. Okay, now I'm going to talk about one more thing when it comes to your baseline grid. So let's say you want a larger line space. So we're going to change this to be, we're actually going to change the baseline grid from 15 to 17. Well, let's go for 18, just so we can see a significant change. So we're going to do 18. Now this is probably a bit too much line spacing. The general rule for line spacing in book design is you want your line spacing, aka your baseline grid, to be 3 to 5, and sometimes you can go up higher to 6 depending on the font point sizes larger than your font. Okay, so in this particular document, we have an 11-point font. So you can go up to 14 would be the absolute minimum line spacing. And with this font, I would think 15, because this is a pretty tall font. So we want to allow it to have that breathing room. So minimum would be 14 point. I would definitely recommend 15 or 16 on this. And with this one, you could even go as high as 17 if you wanted your spacing. Now, for this example, we are doing 18, just so we can see the difference. Okay, now let's go to one of the problems that happen when we adjust the line space, or the the baseline grid. We are going to go to a chapter page. Don't freeze on me, InDesign. Oh, that's the end. Okay, well, let's pretend we're going to make a chapter page. So we're going to say right here, let's see, would help if I use the right tool. Let's come right here, come right here, come right here. Let's see, I'm trying to think of where I'm going to have space. All right, so we're just going to call this chapter 2. We are going to say, make this the chapter number and chapter title here. All right, and then we're going to set this to first para 2, and we are going to drop a chapter title here. All right, so one of the things that happen when we change our baseline grid is on these chapter title pages, okay? And this is where the math comes in, and I'm not a math student by any means. I just know how to correct this issue. Our baseline grid is off on these 2 pages. So if we take a line and we draw it, we drop it on the baseline grid on this side, it's not on the baseline grid on the other side, okay? You see how these are not falling on the same line. Great. Now, it's really not that noticeable, so if you don't want to correct it, you don't have to. Where it's going to be noticeable is if this chapter page filled all the way down to the bottom. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll just drag, copy some paste, and then clear this out. So it's going to be more noticeable here. Let's drag here, because we can see that these are not falling on the same line, so it's not going to be equal. All right, so you're like, well, how do I correct that? Okay, this is my little way that I correct these issues. I draw that line. Now, to draw a line across the screen, just come up to your ruler bar, and if you don't have rulers, you can go to View, Rulers. Let's say View, Rulers here, or Control R for the shortcut. I keep mine on, so I never have to do this, but seeing your rulers is important, and you can easily drag these guidelines down from the ruler. So I'm dragging a guideline. I want this chapter title page to have the same baseline grid as this page over here. So we're going to drag that line, and then I'm going to hold the Control-Shift key down before I release my mouse. Okay, what the Control-Shift key does is it draws that line across both spreads, and that's what we want. Okay, so I'm going to release it, and then I am going to come over here, and make sure you delete this after you do this. I'm going to draw a box. Okay, I'm just going to draw a box from the bottom of the baseline grid here up to that line right there. And then we're going to take the height of this box that I drew, which is 0.2083. I'm going to copy that number, and then I'm going to delete this box. All right, now you're like, what's the point of all this? Okay, so we know we need to change the baseline grid on the title pages. And in our master, even if you don't have the other ones used yet, we actually have 3 pages that are all set with the same top margin. Okay, so we got the B chapter title, we got the E title with no ornament, and the F title with no ornament or no page number. So just because, even if you don't think you'll use these, you might want to go in and tweak these as well, just in case, ooh, I could really use that master. So I'm going to select all of them. And we do it by just clicking on a page, holding your control key down, and then clicking on all the pages that you want to change. All right, and then what we're going to do is go to Layout, Margins and Columns, and if you notice, this time our top margin is not white. It's actually a number there because the top margin on all these pages are the same. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, we want the top margin to, and always have to think about this, and you might have to think about it too. We're going to say take away, so minus whatever the height of that box that we drew that I copied. So the 0.2083 in this particular example, and then we're going to click on OK. Now, if you look at this page, suddenly our baseline grids, if we look at these lines that we drew out, are on that line now. However, the page, the letters are not following on that baseline grid. That's just a little bug in InDesign. So what we're going to do is we are going to drag our master page B back down onto this master page, and suddenly it will adjust and our baseline grid is all the same. All right, so that's it on baseline grids. Baseline grids are probably the most complex thing in book design. So this is just a little tidbit on it, and I hope when I get into my longer videos, we'll have a pretty good detailed video instruction on baseline grids. And just something to note, when you change your margins, a lot of times you'll need to go in and adjust the text frame on your master pages. Okay, now you can have InDesign do this automatically, and I'll show you how to have them do this, because I'm going to show you one more thing that I think will be handy. And you can select both text frames. Just hold the Shift key down to select the other one, and then you can move them together and it resizes them both. Okay, so now all of those are going to be correct. All right, so now what we're going to talk about real quick, and this will be the last thing I promise, is that maybe you want to drop this chapter title page down. Like you don't want it to start all the way up here. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can change it on and just drag these text frames down a bit, and it'll go lower. We can actually delete these out. This is text we added, and it'll go lower. Or you can go in and adjust the margins. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's say we want to drop this 5 lines. Well, how tall are these lines? Well, we set the baseline grid to 18. So we're going to go 18 times 5 because we want to drop it down by 5, and we get 90. All right, so we want to drop this line down by 90 points. Let's see if InDesign will do that. So I'm selecting all those chapter title pages. We're going to go to Layout, Margins, and Adjustments, and we are going to say plus this time because we're dropping it down 90 points. All right, so it did the calculation for us, and since we're previewing the page, you'll notice that it dropped that margin line down here. Now, if we want InDesign to actually redraw, even though we've already done it, so we don't need to worry about it, if we want InDesign to redraw that text frame so it fits within the margin, so we don't have to go to, each individual master page and adjust it ourselves, we can click on Adjust Layout, okay, and then click on OK. Now, I do not have a habit of doing this because a couple of versions ago, InDesign actually had a bug in their Adjust Layout. It has now been corrected, but I still manually do it. So that's up to you. All right, so, and sometimes you might get an error. Now, you might say, well, why did it adjust it? Because it thinks that we changed the thing by 90 points. So it went ahead and moved it 90 points because we had already changed it. So just ignore that. That wouldn't happen if we had done it properly. All right, so we're all good there. All right, so I hope that helps talking about the baseline grid. So just remember, if you can't get a line to come all the way down to the bottom, you may have to tweak your margins, or you may have to break some of the rules within the document when it comes to balancing pages. So there's a couple of areas that you can change, and that's the keep options. One thing I would definitely avoid is changing the keep options on your recto, which is your right-hand page, to where you have a widow down here with an orphan up here. I would not do any widows and orphans across a double page spread. Across a non-double page spread, only on double page spreads. All right, that's it for today. And send me your issues, and if you want to know how to do something, let me know and I'll get a video together for you.